Okay. I tried like this on my other chair, guys and folks. I could set you up on my easel. Sheesh, man, those bugs eat me alive. Yeah, I think chair is okay. I mean, lighting is not perfect, but yeah, that's okay. Alright. My cranberry and a mindfulness exercise already prepared. Yeah, I think like probably my biggest challenge with these just chatting streams is thinking of things to say. I think that it's easier if I just imagine it like I'm thinking out loud and you all are just kind of there too. And that might be a good approach to these. I don't know. It's just that it's like sometimes, like I think a good example of this was like when I was talking in the airport about like COVID precautions. Like I had a lot of topics to discuss, and I think it's like easier for me when I'm given a topic to talk about. When I'm just like talking for the sake of talking, sometimes it's hard to think up the right things to say. Hard to think up topics for conversation. And yeah, reacting might be a way around that too, where it's like I look up things to react to. Yeah, I think I'm trying to also expose myself to new and different types of ideas, and we can explore those ideas. Like dream interpretation is one example. Now, I'm somebody who virtually never dreams. Like I cannot even remember the last time that I dreamt of anything. It's been a very long time since I had a dream, and there was a dream I had not too long ago where I could remember some of the details that I dreamed about. And in this dream, it seems like when I am dreaming, it's like a lot of things happen, and sometimes I can only remember a few key things. It's like main ideas that I remember. And one of those ideas is like, that was in my dream, was me losing my wallet. And I look it up and it's like, usually that happens after you experience some sort of loss in your life. And this year has been a period of loss for me in my life. Like I have lost my job somewhat recently, so it could have something to do with that. But yeah, for the most part, I don't usually dream. Yeah, I don't hardly ever dream at all. And when I go to sleep now, it's like extremely late in the day. It's like 4 o'clock in the morning when I go to sleep now. So that could also have something to do with it. Okay. But yeah, for a very long period of time, I just did not dream at all. Yeah. Or if I did dream, it's the case that I just simply cannot remember what occurred in the dream. Okay, for today's mindfulness exercise, this will be a breathing exercise while visualizing a box. It could be like a cardboard box. It could be shipping box. I mean it. Yeah, I would say it could be any kind of box. Okay. Inhale to the count of 4 as you visualize the top edge of a box. Hold your breath for a count of 4 as you go down along the right side. Exhale for a count of 4, moving from right to left along the bottom edge. Hold for another count of 4, going up along the left side back to the top. Repeat for several cycles for at least 1 minute. Okay, so I believe based on time that about half a minute has passed. So we'll inhale again. We'll do one more cycle. The top. Hold for 4. On the sides. Exhale for 4. The bottom. I don't know why it's hard for me to hold. Let me try again. Hold for another 4, counting. Hold for another 4 seconds, going up along the left side. I mean, it could be any side for that matter. Okay, and that. Yeah, I don't know. Whew. I think this is probably as good as it's gonna get. Okay. It might make sense for me to invest at some point in one of those phone holders. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe if I get more serious on TikTok, it could make sense to invest in that. But I just don't see the point at this point in time. Yeah, when doing this exercise, the box exercise, I think that it doesn't really matter which side it is, because based on the nature of boxes and cubes, if it's a perfect box, all 6 sides should be the same length. And I don't know, maybe one side does matter more than the other, but for the sake of this, I don't think it really matters. Okay. These were all 1 minute exercises. I might try to start just having a mindfulness intro before the reading exercise. I think it does particularly make sense on Tuesdays and Thursdays if those are going to be our exercise days, to kind of give us a cooling down period. But yeah, I don't know. I think they're good to do. I am tired. Just kidding. I'm probably not going to fall asleep until like 3 a.m. at the earliest. Just based on my sleeping and waking cycles. This guy is cranberry juice. cranberry juice and grape. Okay, let's dive into the reading today. We will be taking a look at War and Peace, Book 2, Chapter 3. I don't really know why Leo has broken up the books the way he has instead of having continuous chapters. Yeah, I don't know why that is. Maybe to keep it more like organized. Maybe, I don't know. Since we're already in Sapiens, though, let me start with Sapiens, and then we'll head into War and Peace. In Sapiens, the chapter that we're in is called the Frankenstein Prophecy. And yeah, since this is a just chatting stream, I'll try to insert more of my own live reactions into and throughout the reading. This may be, and I think I'm intending to do that more and more over time, but some topics, it's easier for me to do that than others. It requires, on my part, an adequate level of understanding and background knowledge in order to expand on what it is I'm reading. So it really just depends on what it is we're talking about. Okay. In 1818, Mary Shelley published Frankenstein, the story of a scientist who tries to create a superior being and instead creates a monster. In the last 2 centuries, this story has been told over and over again in countless variations. It has become a central pillar of our new scientific mythology. At first sight, the Frankenstein story appears to warn us that if we try to play God and engineer life, we will be punished severely. Yet the story has a deeper meaning. Yeah, it does seem to be antagonistic in a way to the concept of scientific progress. And thus far, if you've been following my stream, you know that I've been very supportive and advocated a lot for scientific progress. So I would say that I probably would primarily disagree with Mary Shelley's take in Frankenstein that progress is bad. Like, I would say that reckless progress is certainly bad, but as I've said, with sufficient responsibility, those initiatives and that progress could dramatically improve people's lives. And we've seen several examples of that highlighted by Yuval in the last few chapters. Stuff like stem cell research and bionic limbs can help people. I think it's Board Fox, right? Let me see if I can read. Oh, hey, Board Fox. Thanks for visiting, even if you can't stay. And yeah, you can always catch the VOD if you can't stay awake for the entire stream. I know I'm streaming later in the day, so yeah, it's okay. But anyway, yeah, it was like I was looking at a guy, or it was a guy, and half of his skull was missing. I ended up doing a little bit of research on this. I'm like, why is this the case? Is this a birth defect? Now, there are birth defects where babies, I found out, can be born without part of their skull. And it's tied to the amount of folic acid that a woman gets in her diet during pregnancy. Now, I didn't even know about all this. But, yeah, there was a guy, I saw him in a video, he had a part of his skull missing, and I'm like, what happened? And based on what I saw, there were a few other people who had that also too, and it's because they survived falls, like very high falls. and I guess they landed on their head and like part of their skull was destroyed. Yeah, and I don't even really know or understand how people can survive stuff like that, but apparently they can sometimes. And when they do, they just have like skull fractures and stuff like that. But they have metal plates that you can actually put in to your skull to kind of help them to make it look like you're normal again. And I'd say that is another case in point example of what it is I'm referring to, which is that science, medicine, and technology, when advanced with the right cause and applied correctly, can significantly improve people's lives. So, like Frankenstein, I understand Frankenstein, but at the same time, I think it's closed-minded in some ways. The Frankenstein myth confronts Homo sapiens with the fact that the last days are fast approaching. Unless some nuclear ecological catastrophe intervenes, so goes the story, the pace of technological development will soon lead to the replacement of Homo sapiens by completely different beings who possess not only different physiques, but also very different cognitive and emotional worlds. This is something most sapiens find extremely disconcerting. We like to believe that in the future people just like us will travel from planet to planet in fast spaceships. We don't like to contemplate the possibility that in the future beings with emotions and identities like ours will no longer exist, and our place will be taken by alien life forms whose abilities dwarf our own. We seek comfort in the fantasy that Dr. Frankenstein can create only terrible monsters, whom we would have to destroy in order to save the world. We like to tell the story that way because it implies that we are the best of all beings, that there never was and never will be something better than us. Any attempt to improve us will inevitably fail, because even if our bodies might be improved, you cannot touch the human spirit. I don't think it's going to take much at all to improve. You just need to have open minds. Okay. We would have a hard time swallowing the fact that scientists can engineer spirits as well as bodies, and that future Dr. Frankensteins could therefore create something truly superior to us. Something that will look at us as condescendingly as we look at Neanderthals. And it may not require like experimentation for that to be the case. It could just be different discoveries that are made. Like the advent of computers, for example, that dramatically change the way we live our lives. We cannot be certain whether today's Frankensteins will indeed fulfill this prophecy. The future is unknown, and it would be surprising if the forecast of the last few pages were realized in full. History teaches us that what seems to be just around the corner may never materialize due to unforeseen barriers, and that other unimagined scenarios will in fact come to pass. When the nuclear age erupted in the 1940s, many forecasts were made about the future nuclear war of the year 2000. When Sputnik and Apollo 11 fired the imagination of the world, everyone began predicting that by the end of the century, people would be living in space colonies on Mars and Pluto. Few of these forecasts came true. On the other hand, nobody foresaw the internet. Exactly. And it's kind of like humility. Like, in a word, humility goes a long way. It's like, kind of like what we've already talked about in this book is like that explorer mindset of like, you don't know what's out there, but you are open to the possibilities. Like, I think that's the attitude that scientists need to have. Instead of XYZ will happen, because there's a chance that it won't, right? We don't have enough advances in the technology in time. There isn't enough funding. Any one of another number of things that could happen on planet Earth. It's like we don't know that will be the case, but it may someday be possible. And yeah, nobody foresaw the internet. A lot of those things are kind of like what I was talking about yesterday. It's like some developments people couldn't really predict. They just can't predict how some of these things play out. It's like a whole new concept, a whole new idea. People weren't even considering it. It's like a lot of ideas are based on other ideas, but some ideas just seem to come out of the blue. It's like it's all new. Yeah, and I'm trying to figure out what the secret ingredient is to that whole concept. I think it's based in creativity. A little bit of creativity, a little bit of ingenuity, and yeah, sometimes it really does just come down to dumb luck. So don't go out just yet to buy liability insurance to indemnify you against lawsuits filed by digital beings. The above fantasies or nightmares are just stimulants for your imagination. What we should take seriously is the idea that the next stage of history will include not only technological and organizational transformations, but also fundamental transformations in human consciousness and identity. And these could be transformations so fundamental that they would call the very term human into question. How long do we have? No one really knows. As already mentioned, some say that by 2050 a few humans will already be immortal. Less radical forecasts speak of the next century, or the next millennium. Excuse me. Yet from the perspective of 70,000 years of sapiens history, what are a few millennia? If the curtain is indeed about to drop on sapiens history, we members of one of its final generations should devote some time to answering one last question. What do we want to become? This question, sometimes known as the human enhancement question, dwarfs the debates that currently preoccupy politicians, philosophers, scholars, and ordinary people. That's because, the human mind is not really well equipped to deal with certain levels of ambiguity. Questions like, what do we want to become? It's such a broad question that your brain cannot provide a clear and concise answer, because there's just so many possibilities, right? It's like do I choose this, that, this, that, this, that? After all, today's debate between today's religions, ideologies, nations, and classes will all likelihood disappear along with Homo sapiens. If our successors indeed function on a different level of consciousness, or perhaps possess something beyond consciousness that we cannot even conceive, it seems doubtful that Christianity or Islam will be of interest to them. That their social organization could be communist or capitalist, or that genders could be male or female. I'm of the belief that concepts like Christianity, capitalism, will in 500 years all be completely irrelevant. People of that time period may look back at our time period and go, what were they thinking? Can you believe it was like that back in those days? And yeah, I keep saying it, but it's too dang bad that I wasn't born in that time. And yet, the great debates of history are important because at least the first generation of these gods would be shaped by the cultural ideas of their human designers. Would they be created in the image of capitalism, of Islam, or feminism? The answer to this question might send them careening into entirely different directions. Most people prefer not to think about it. Even the field of bioethics prefers to address another question. What is it forbidden to do? Is it acceptable to carry out genetic experiments on living beings? On aborted fetuses? On stem cells? Is it ethical to clone sheep and chimpanzees? What about humans? All of these are important questions, but it is naive to imagine that we might simply hit the brakes and stop the scientific projects that are upgrading Homo sapiens into a different kind of being. For these projects are inextricably meshed together with the Gilgamesh project. Again, it's like some of these questions have simple answers. And I don't know, it's like it requires a discussion about ethics. It's like what even at a certain level, it's like any and all human information, any and all knowledge that we have gets completely broken down. And ethics is the same way. It's like philosophers can like debate and argue about it left, right, and center. It's like what truly is right and wrong? What is truly ethical? And morality is a construct, so there isn't really any intrinsic meaning. For these projects are inextricably meshed together with the Gilgamesh project. Ask scientists why they study the genome, or try to connect a brain to a computer, or try to create a mind inside a computer. 9 out of 10 times you'll get a standard answer. We are doing it to cure diseases and save human lives. Even though the implications of creating a mind inside a computer are far more dramatic than curing psychiatric illnesses. This is the standard justification given because nobody can argue with it. This is why the Gilgamesh project is the flagship of science. It serves to justify everything science does. Dr. Frankenstein piggybacks on the shoulders of Gilgamesh. Since it is impossible to stop Gilgamesh, it is also impossible to stop Dr. Frankenstein. I think the aims of the Gilgamesh project are, simply put, unnecessary. As I've said, why would anyone want to live forever? Like who would possibly want that? Even the person with the best life on Earth right now, like the richest people, Bill Gates, for example, I don't even think Bill Gates would want to live forever. It's foolish to want that, in my opinion. The only thing that we can try to do is to influence the direction scientists are taking. But since we might soon be able to engineer our desires too, the real question facing us is not what do we want to become, but what do we want to want? Those who are not spooked by this question probably haven't given it enough thought. Yeah, I think I'm among them. Alright, then the next section of the book is the afterword, the animal that became a god. Yeah, I don't know. I guess I can leave Sapiens on those very ambiguous, open questions. What do we want to become? What do we want to want? They're kind of the same questions I'm asking myself at this stage of my career. It's like, what do I really want to do? It's like, some of those questions have elusive answers because of the nature of the question. And we're about 87% of the way through Sapiens. I think we're about done with Sapiens. probably a couple more days in Sapiens, and then I'll have to change up and choose a different book for you all. I can take suggestions, or I can also choose a book that we haven't looked at. Like Crime and Punishment might actually be a really good one. Fyodor Dostoevsky. Yeah, that one might go actually extremely well with War and Peace. Alright. Speaking of War and Peace, let's take a look in chapter 3. Yeah, they are undergoing battle preparations. On returning from review, Kutuzov took the Austrian general into his private room and, calling his assistant, asked for some papers relating to the condition of the troops on their arrival, and the letters that had come from the Archduke Ferdinand, who was in command of the advanced army. Prince Andrew Bolkonsky came into the room with the required papers. Kutuzov and the Austrian member of the Hofkriegsrath, yeah, I don't know, it's a German word, Hofkriegsrath, I have no clue. We're sitting at the table on which a plan was spread out. I'm thinking maybe it's Austrian in nature, Hofkriegsrath. Yeah, I don't know. Said Kutuzov, glancing at Bolkonsky, as if by this exclamation he was asking the adjutant to wait. And he went on with the conversation in French. "All I can say, General," said he with a pleasant elegance of expression and intonation that obliged one to listen to each deliberately spoken word. It was evident that Kutuzov himself listened with pleasure to his own voice. Yeah, some people are like that. I'm not. They like to hear themselves talk. "All I can say, General, is that if the matter depended on my personal wishes, the will of His Majesty the Emperor Francis would have been fulfilled long ago. I should long ago have joined the Archduke." Actually, it's funny because I remember my parents used to always ask me, it's like, why are you so quiet? It's like, because I hate talking, simply put. Or I just don't have anything valuable to say. Anyway, yeah, I should have joined the Archduke. And believe me on my honor that, to me personally, it would be a pleasure to hand over the supreme command of the army into the hands of a better informed and more skillful general, of whom Austria has so many, and to lay down all this heavy responsibility. But circumstances are sometimes too strong for us, General. And Kutuzov smiled in a way that seemed to say, "You are quite at liberty not to believe me. And I don't even care whether you do or not, but you have no grounds for telling me so. And that is the whole point." The Austrian general looked dissatisfied, but had no option to reply in the same tone. "On the contrary," he said in a querulous and angry tone that contrasted with his flattering words, "on the contrary, your Excellency's participation in the common action is highly valued by His Majesty. But we think the present delay is depriving the splendid Russian troops and their commander of the laurels they've been accustomed to win in their battles." He concluded his evidently prearranged sentence. Kutuzov bowed with a smile. "But that is my conviction, and judging by the last letter with which His Highness the Archduke Ferdinand has honored me, I imagine that the Austrian troops under the direction of so skillful a leader as General Mack have by now already gained a decisive victory and no longer need our aid," said Kutuzov. The general frowned. Though there was no definite news of an Austrian defeat, there were many circumstances confirming the unfavorable rumors that were afloat. And so Kutuzov's suggestion of an Austrian victory sounded much like irony. But Kutuzov went on blandly smiling with the same expression, which seemed to say that he had a right to suppose so. And in fact, the last letter he'd received from Mack's army informed him of a victory and stated strategically the position of the army was very favorable. Give me that letter, said Kutuzov, turning to Prince Andrew. Please, have a look at it. And Kutuzov, with an ironical smile about the corners of his mouth, read to the Austrian general the following passage. In German, from the Archduke Ferdinand's letter. We have fully concentrated forces of nearly 70,000 men with which to attack and defeat the enemy, should he cross the Lech. Also, as we are masters of Ulm, we cannot be deprived of the advantage of commanding both sides of the Danube, so that should the enemy not cross the Lech, we can cross the Danube, throw ourselves on his line of communications, recross the river lower down, and frustrate his intention, should he try to direct his whole force against our faithful ally. We shall therefore confidently await the moment when the Imperial Russian army will be fully equipped, and shall then, in conjunction with it, easily find a way to prepare for the enemy the fate he deserves. Yeah, looks like they're still planning. Kutuzov sighed deeply on finishing this paragraph and looked at the member of the Hofgarth mildly and attentively. But you know the wise maxim of your excellency, advising one to expect the worst, said the Austrian general, evidently wishing to have done with jests and to come to business. He involuntarily looked around at the aide-de-camp. Excuse me, General, interrupted Kutuzov, also turning to Prince Andrew. Look here, my dear fellow. Get from Kozlovsky all the reports from our scouts. Here are 2 letters from Count Nostitz, and here is one from His Highness, the Archduke Ferdinand. And here are these, he said, handing him several papers. Make a neat memorandum in French out of all this, showing all the news we have had of the movements of the Austrian army, and give it to His Excellency. Prince Andrew bowed his head in token of having understood from the first not only what had been said, but also what Kutuzov would have liked to tell him. He gathered up the papers and with a bow to both, stepped softly over the carpet and went out into the waiting room. Though not much time had passed since Prince Andrew had left Russia, he had changed greatly during that period. In the expression of his face, in his movements, in his walk, scarcely a trace was left of his former affected languor and indolence. He now looked like a man who has time to think of the impression he makes on others, but is occupied with agreeable and interesting work. His face expressed more satisfaction with himself and those around him. His smile and glance were brighter and more attractive. Like his life has more meaning now. Yeah. Yeah, it's like his life has newfound purpose as a result of him being on the battlefield. Kind of like what I was saying yesterday. It's like back in those days, they didn't really have a lot to do. So it's like whenever a war came around, they're like, ooh, finally get to see some action. Kutuzov, whom he had overtaken in Poland, had received him very kindly, promised not to forget him, distinguished him above the other adjutants, and had taken him to Vienna and given him more serious commissions. From Vienna, Kutuzov wrote to his old comrade, Prince Andrew's father. Your son bids fair to become an officer distinguished by his industry, firmness, and expedition. I consider myself fortunate to have such a subordinate by me. On Kutuzov's staff, among his fellow officers and in the army generally, Prince Andrew had, as he had in Petersburg society, 2 quite opposite reputations. Some, a minority, acknowledged him to be different from themselves and from everyone else, expected great things of him, listened to him, admired him, and imitated him, and with them, Prince Andrew was natural and pleasant. Others, the majority, disliked him and considered him conceited, cold, and disagreeable. But among these people, Prince Andrew knew how to take his stand so that they respected and even feared him. Coming out of Kutuzov's room into the waiting room with the papers in his hand, Prince Andrew came up to his comrade, the aide-de-camp on duty, Kozlovsky, who was sitting at the window with the book. Well, Prince, asked Kozlovsky, I'm ordered to write a memorandum explaining why we are not advancing. And why is it? Prince Andrew shrugged his shoulders. Any news from Mac? No. If it were true that he's been beaten, news would have come. Probably, said Prince Andrew, moving toward the outer door. It's like, yeah, we haven't heard from him in a couple months, but he's probably fine. Like, that is not a good sign, Prince Andrew, in wartime, okay? You want to hear from your allies. If you have not heard from someone, they're probably not doing okay. Just ask any dead person. You know, it's like, the reason you're not hearing from them is because they're not there anymore. But at that instant, a tall Austrian general in a greatcoat, with the Order of Maria Teresa on his neck and a black bandage around his head, black bandage around his head, who had evidently just arrived, entered quickly, slamming the door. Prince Andrew stopped short. Commander-in-Chief Kutuzov, said the newly arrived general, speaking quickly with a harsh German accent. The German accent's like, Where is it? Yeah, I kind of like that. Yeah, I don't know how to do this one. Commander-in-Chief Kutuzov. Yeah, I have no idea how to do that in a German accent. Looking to both sides and advancing straight toward the end door. The Commander-in-Chief is engaged, said Kozlovsky, going hurriedly up to the unknown general and blocking his way to the door. Whom shall I announce? The unknown general looked disdainfully down at Kozlovsky, who was rather short, as if surprised that anyone should not know him. The Commander-in-Chief is engaged, repeated Kozlovsky calmly. The general's face clouded, his lips quivered and trembled. He took out a notebook, hurriedly scribbled something in pencil, tore out the leaf, gave it to Kozlovsky, stepped quickly to the window and threw himself into a chair, gazing at those in the room as if asking, why did they look at me? Then he lifted his head, stretched his neck as if he intended to say something, but, immediately with affected indifference, began to hum to himself, producing a queer sound which immediately broke off. The door of the private room opened and Kutuzov appeared in the doorway. The general with the bandaged head bent forward as though running away from some danger, and making long, quick strides with his thin legs, went up to Kutuzov. Vous voyez les malheureux Mac, he uttered in a broken voice. Yeah, I don't know what that means. Kutuzov's face as he stood in the open doorway remained perfectly immobile for a few moments. Then wrinkles ran over his face like a wave, and his forehead became smooth again. He bowed his head respectfully, closed his eyes, silently let Mac enter his room before, and closed the door behind him. Closed the door himself behind him. The report, which had been circulated that the Austrians had been beaten and that the whole army had surrendered at home, proved to be correct. Within half an hour, adjutants had been sent in various directions with orders which showed that the Russian troops, who had hitherto been inactive, would also soon have to meet the enemy. And sometimes it's like you're just putting it off because you just don't want to do it. Like, we're not rushing off to war because we don't want to get killed on the battlefield. We're not going to the DMV because we don't want to stand in the line. It's like the same way. The report, which had been circulated, says that they really were beaten, and now the Russians have to get ready to go to war. Prince Andrew was one of those rare staff officers whose chief interest lay in the general progress of the war. When he saw Mac and heard the details of his disaster, he understood that half the campaign was lost, understood all the difficulties of the Russian army's position, and vividly imagined what awaited it and the part he would have to play. Involuntarily, he felt a joyful agitation at the thought of the humiliation of arrogant Austria. and that in a week's time he might perhaps see and take part in the first Russian encounter with the French since Suvorov met them. He feared that Bonaparte's genius might outweigh all the courage of the Russian troops, and at the same time could not admit the idea of his hero being disgraced. Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it's gonna be a bloodbath. Excited and irritated by these thoughts, Prince Andrew went towards his room to write to his father, to whom he wrote every day. In the corridor he met Nesvitsky, whom he shared a room, and the wag Zherkov. They were as usual laughing. "Why are you so glum?" asked Nesvitsky, noticing Prince Andrew's pale face and glittering eyes. "There's nothing to be gay about," answered Bolkonsky. Just as Prince Andrew met Nesvitsky and Zherkov, they came toward them from the other end of the corridor. Strach, an Austrian general who on Kutuzov's staff in charge of the provisioning of the Russian army, and the member of the Hofguards, who had arrived the previous evening. There was room enough in the wide corridor for the generals to pass the three officers quite easily. But Zherkov, pushing Nesvitsky aside with his arm, said in a breathless voice, "They're coming. They're coming. Stand aside. Make way. Please, make way." The generals were passing by, looking as if they wished to avoid embarrassing attentions. On the face of the wag Zherkov there suddenly appeared a stupid smile of glee, which he seemed unable to suppress. "Your Excellency," said he in German, stepping forward and addressing the Austrian general, "I have the honor to congratulate you." He bowed his head and scraped first with one foot and then the other awkwardly like a child at a dancing lesson. The member of the Hofguard looked at him severely, but seeing the seriousness of his stupid smile, could not give him a moment's attention. He screwed up his eyes, showing that he was listening. Screwed up here just means looking up, I guess. Looking at someone or into someone's eyes. "I have the honor to congratulate you. General Mack has arrived quite well, only a little bruised just here. He's got bandages around his head. I think he's not doing fine," he added, pointing with a beaming smile to his head. The general frowned, turned away, and went on. "Gott wie Nave," said he angrily after he had gone a few steps, meaning, "Good God, what simplicity." Nesvitsky, with a laugh, threw his arms around Prince Andrew. But Bolkonsky, turning still paler, pushed him away with an angry look and turned to Zherkov. "This is something else that Leo does that kind of annoys me, is he changes up the way that either he has characters referred to by their title only, or what he's doing in this chapter is he's like switching up the name. So it's like Prince Andrew, Bolkonsky, Prince Andrew, Bolkonsky. Pick one, Leo, and stick with it, please. It's like, if it's Prince Andrew, just call him Prince Andrew. Like, you don't need to say Bolkonsky. Like, it's just, all it does is confuse the reader. That's all it does. Because again, you've got all these characters. You're throwing names around like it's a dinner party or something. And it's like, hard to know what's going on. It's like, what the heck? The nervous irritation aroused by the appearance of Mack, the news of his defeat, and the thought of what lay before the Russian army found vent in anger at Zherkov's untimely jest. "If you, sir, choose to make a buffoon of yourself," he said sharply with a slight trembling of the lower jaw, "I can't prevent your doing so, but I warn you that if you dare to play the fool in my presence, I will teach you to behave yourself." Nesvitsky and Zherkov were so surprised by this outburst that they gazed at Bolkonsky silently with wide open eyes. "What's the matter? I only congratulated them," said Zherkov. "I am not jesting with you. Please be silent," cried Bolkonsky, and taking Nesvitsky's arm, he left Zherkov, who did not know what to say. "Come, what's the matter, old fellow?" said Nesvitsky, trying to soothe him. "What's the matter?" exclaimed Prince Andrew, standing still in his excitement. "Don't you understand that either we are officers serving our Tsar and our country, rejoicing in the successes and grieving at the misfortunes of our common cause, We are merely lackeys who care nothing for their master's business. Courant Mill massacres at l'armée. De nos allies détruits et vous trouvez mon père rire. He said, as if strengthening his views by this French sentence. C'est bien pour un garçon de rien. Yeah, I don't speak French, so I'm just going to do my best on this. Comme cet individu dont vous avez fait un ami, mais pas pour vous, pas pour vous. Only a hobbledehoy could amuse himself in this way, he added in Russian, but pronouncing the word with a French accent, having noticed that Zherkov could still hear him. 40,000 men massacred and the army of our allies destroyed, and you find that a cause for jesting. It's all very well for that good-for-nothing fellow of whom you have made a friend, but not for you, not for you. Yeah, these chapters are like mega freaking long, too. He waited a moment to see whether the cornet would answer, but he turned and went out of the corridor. It's like we were just procrastinating, hoping that things would be okay, and then they weren't okay. It's like if you had just advanced and met up with General Mack, he might have been able to win that battle. Just saying. By hanging back in Burien, you might have screwed the pooch on that one. But let's just keep talking about how, how the Austrian army, how you thought the Austrian army was okay, and then it wasn't actually okay. We thought it was going to be okay, and it wasn't. Okay, well now you're going to be able to face against Napoleon. In about 10 chapters, whenever Leo gets around to actually putting us in the conflicts. Yeah, hopefully it's soon, because all these like battle preparation chapters are like getting tedious to read through. It's like he gave him the letter. Yeah, and they're just talking. It's like, let's get to the action, please. Less conversation, a lot more action, please. It's like if talking's gonna win the war, these guys are already in a position to win it. Okay, that concludes chapter 3. Thank you guys for watching, and have a nice night.